Mr. Chairman, we can begin whenever you're ready.
Perfect. All. Nope. Take it away. Okay. Oh, you are recording? Perfect. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this Metro Plan Orlando MAC meeting, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Keith Trace, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. We also have a team of folks behind the scenes making sure that this meeting runs smoothly. Welcome to everyone in the room and everyone listening online. As we continue to meet in person, all committee members are required to be present here in the Metro Plan Orlando board meet room, while staff will continue to stream these meetings online for public access. Now it's time for the Pledge of Allegiance. Will everyone please rise? And today I ask Mayor Gardner to lead us in the pledge. All right, thank you very much. This morning, if you would please keep your microphones muted unless you've been recognized to speak. I do ask that all committee members activate your microphones before speaking and then turn them off when you are complete. As a reminder, the microphone is turned on and off by pressing the blue button, the one with the talking face on it, located in the middle of the screen in front of you. There are two public comment points of this meeting. Members of the public participating virtually will be able to use the raise hands feature on their Zoom screen. If attending by phone, they can hit the *9 button to be recognized. We will also be accepting comments via email and phone message before the meeting. Welcome. The guidelines for public comment are posted at metroplanorlando.org/virtual meetings. We want this and all future meetings to be accessible to all. Participants may join by computer, tablet, or phone. If you need accommodations to participate in the future, please contact Metro Plan Orlando staff. At this time, I'd like to recognize Alex Trauger of Metro Plan Orlando staff for the agenda review.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome. Good to see everyone here today. My remarks are very brief. We do not have any changes to the printed agenda. I do know we have a relatively new face, but I think he was with us last time, Cody Johnson from Lynx, but he'll introduce himself during his report later in the agenda. He's our new Lynx representative for you, our liaison to the Municipal Advisory Committee. We have, as you know, we've had some staffing changes at Metro Plan Orlando, and we have brought on some new staff. So over the next couple meetings and couple months, we'll be introducing you to some of our new transportation planners, and those will be working with your local government partners in advancing some of your key priority projects. So they're actually at a planning conference today. The American Planning Association Florida Planning Conference is here in Orlando, so a lot of our key planning talent from around the region and many of your municipalities I actually was there yesterday, so I were able to see them there. So becoming enlightened and kind of sharing the good information from around the state. So that's happening today, but we'll certainly be introducing you to some of our new staff, and you'll be seeing those faces in the coming months. Mr. Chair, we do have Longwood Commissioner Sackett joining us virtually today. He wasn't able to attend, and we were able to patch him in this morning online. So he is listening in on the virtual side, and we've promoted him to a panelist. So he should be able to engage in discussion as necessary. But with that concludes my announcements, and I'll hand things over to Kathy and Lisa to go ahead and call the roll.
I'll ask all committee members to keep microphones muted until called. Please say here or present when your name is called. Weaver for Anderson.
Here.
Guthrie. Gardner.
Here.
Dowless. Sackett.
Here.
Gerstner. Foraker. Henson.
Here.
McCann.
Here.
O'Brien. Ramos.
Present.
Slater.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Trace.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the roll call. We do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And I did hear that Mayor Dowless and Foraker will be a little late today, but they should be here. All right. Up next is public comment on action items. Do we have anyone who would like to speak to these items? If so, please use the raise hand feature on your screen or press *9 on your phone keypad. When we call your name, the host will unmute your microphone. You will see a button that pops up and says host wants to unmute you. Please accept the prompt and activate your microphone. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record and keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. Is there anyone at this time?
There's no one on the Chairman.
All right, perfect. Were there any written comments submitted before the meeting?
Nothing received in advance of the meeting.
Perfect. And is there anyone in the room that wishes to speak? All right, seeing none, we will move on to reports from our agency partners. Up first is Ms. Hinson with FDOT District 5. Take it away.
Good morning, Chairman and members. For the FDOT report, you have the information for the construction report and the information with the agenda. We just want to say thank you to our local partners, our work program, and our local agency program office, excuse me, has been meeting with our local partners to discuss some of the projects that are upcoming. We still don't have our allocations yet, so we're not able to discuss money, but we are discussing projects and any additional information that we need from them to be able to move forward. Additionally, I'd just like to announce that the week of September the 12th through the 16th is College Week for the Sunrail, and that means that students, faculty, and staff, college students, faculty, and staff are able to ride free with their ID for the week of September the 12th through the 16th. And the following week, the 19th through the 23rd, is Rail Safety Week, so there'll be a lot of information that will be forthcoming to promote rail safety throughout Central Florida. That's all the information I have this morning.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Hinson? All right, up next is Mr. Cody Johnson with Links. Out of the corner of my eye, if you didn't say anything, I would have thought it was Miles, but
Hello, everyone. Good morning. As Alex said, my name is Cody Johnson. I'm going to be your new Links representative for this committee, and I'm really excited to be here. Look forward to it. So let's start off with some updates, ridership updates. Current weekday ridership last week was 54,258 passengers a day. That kind of continues the trend of us recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. We currently sit at about 68% post-pandemic, pre-pandemic ridership levels right now. We actually had our highest ridership day on September 2nd since COVID began, and that was 55,994 passengers on that day. So it's good news. We keep recovering. We're kind of seeing that slow trend back up. So some projects that we're working on, we have the Transit Development Plan, which is a 10-year planning document that we are required to do every 5 years. That was just put in front of our board. The last board meeting on August 25th. So yeah, we have the system-wide passenger survey that is coming up. That's going to be done at the end of October, early November, and it's going to run all the way through February. The big thing with this survey is kind of learning about how our passengers actually use the system. So where they're coming from, where they're going to, how many transfers are you making? It's a survey that's required by the FTA to be done every 5 years. It's a big survey. We're going to have over 60 surveyors actually ride the buses, ride Sunrail, ride NeighborLink, and talk to our passengers and conduct the survey that way. So it's a big survey. So, and we are hard at work for our December service change. As you know, we do 3 service changes every year. December, April, and August, and we're currently working on our December service change. That's going to have more information kind of to come for that. Some of the things that we're working on is expanded NeighborLink service in Oviedo along with Sanford. So, and then also extending limo downtown along with some other minor schedule adjustments on the entire system. So more to come on that, but that ends my report.
all right, thank you very much. Anyone have any questions for Links? Perfect, moving on. Next is Mr. Seosi Fine with FTE.
Good morning, committee members. I So this morning, I'll be letting you know about some public meetings that we've been having on some projects around the area. So last week on September 30th and August 1st, we held two public meetings. September 30th was the virtual option, and then August 30th was the virtual option, and September 1st was the in-person option. And this was the public information meeting for the State Road 417 widening from Aloma to State Road 434. Also, next week, we'll be holding public information meetings, one on September 12th and then one on September 13th. September 12th will be the virtual option, and September 13th will be the in-person option. And the public information meeting is for the widening of the Turnpike Main Line from Neptune Road to Osceola Parkway. And this is actually two widening projects, but since they're adjacent to each other, we're just doing one public information meeting. But with that being said, that is the end of my report.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone have any questions for Florida Turnpike?
I can figure out. It's not exactly related to what you just said, but I have been reading in the news that there are plans to have half-price tolls for a long time. And my understanding is that you guys are set up to operate based on, like, that's how you're funded. Like, how are you gonna, how is that gonna be addressed?
I believe I've seen the same news story, and it was from our governor, and he announced that at the Turnpike headquarters. I would have to actually get back to you on that. I know we do function on toll money, but we wouldn't have done it if we couldn't continue our operations. So.
The way I was seeing some of that is it's balanced through other parts of the budget, putting into it, because there's bond covenants and everything with Turnpike and with CFX, yeah, so. I had the same question, but I didn't.
Historic surplus right now.
Yeah, exactly.
25% off, I thought, is it?
25? 25 for you, 50 for her.
Yeah, exactly.
And then if you're a commuter, which I don't think I've seen what constitutes a commuter.
The way that, my understanding is that the more you use it, the cheaper it is. So if you generate, say, $2,000 a year, you're going to be at 50% reduction. If you generate $1,000 in tolls per year, you're going to get 25 or something, sliding scale like that. So, and this is all based on, my understanding is that it's based on the historic funds that are available in the state. Our budget, we've got a lot of extra money, and the governor's seeking ways to, it's, election season, he's seeking ways to give it back, I think.
All right, any other questions for FTE? All right, thank you. Up next, we have 4 action items today. The first action item is the approval of the MAC minutes from July 2022. These can be found on tab 1 of your agenda packets. Is there anyone that wishes to make a motion or have
I
any
move
changes?
we approve them.
I'll second that motion.
All right, motion by Mayor Sladek, second by Mayor McCain. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? All right, item passes unanimously. Our next 3 action items are amendments to the fiscal year 22-23 through 26-27 TIP, found in tab 2, 3, and 4 of your agendas. Mr. Keith Caskey with Metroplan Orlando staff will be guiding us through these next few action items on the agenda. Take it away.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. The first amendment request came up after the June, July committee and board meetings, and this had to be amended into the TIP by an August 10th deadline, just to keep the project on schedule. So FDOT requested that this amendment be processed on an emergency basis. So our board chairwoman signed the resolution approving this request based on Metroplan's policy for processing emergency TIP amendments. And this includes adding funds for the resurfacing and safety project on State Road 436 from North Lake Boulevard to Boston Avenue due to cost increases for the project. And the information on this is in tab 2 in your agenda packets. And the board will be requested to ratify this amendment at their September 14th meeting. So unless there's any questions, we're asking for your recommendation to ratify the amendment.
I do have a question. So the sheet that's in here shows a $10.4 million total bucket of money. How much of that is the change versus how much was already in there and it's just increasing some of those funds?
The original cost was, I think, about 7.1 million, so the increase would be about 3.3 million.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't see anywhere where
Yeah.
that was shown. And then where do those funds come from? Did it come from another project that we had to bump down the list?
Not to my knowledge. I think they're just, this is just additional funding that's available for the project.
Okay,
And this
Yeah.
is just due to cost increases for building materials and labor and so on.
yeah, and I figure we're gonna have a bunch of these as we
Yeah,
go
there's
through
gonna-
with the
Yeah,
times.
the costs were covered based on existing reserves that were available for the project.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for staff on this? All right, do I hear a motion to recommend ratification of this amendment?
So moved.
All right, motion by Foraker, second by Slatek. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like side? All right, item passes unanimously.
Okay, next we have our annual roll forward amendment, and this includes projects that had funds that were originally programmed in fiscal year 2022 in last year's TIP, and those funds were not committed by the end of the fiscal year on June 30th, and so they just automatically roll forward into fiscal year 2023 and FDOT's new adopted five-year work program that came out in July. So we have to amend our TIP to include these projects so it'll be consistent with the work program, and this does not affect the cost or schedule for these projects. And as many of you know, this is a routine procedure that we go through about this time every year. And the information on this is in tab 3 in your packets. So again, unless there's any questions, we're asking for your approval of the amendment.
All right, does anyone have any questions?
Motion to approve.
All right, motion by Mary Henson.
Second.
Who gets it? All right, you got a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like side? All right, item passes unanimously.
Okay, and then the third amendment request includes some scoping and funding changes for several projects on I-4 that are linked to the Beyond the Ultimate project. And this information is in tab 4. And before you take action on this, FDOT staff is going to give a presentation to provide some more details on these projects. And we have Catalina Chacon and Hada Magib from FDOT here today. And I'm going to turn it over to Catalina to start off the presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, Catalina Chacon with the FDOT, and here with me today I have Hada Magib, the FDOT project manager for the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate projects. So as you heard, we are here to provide an update on the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate. As you will be seeing a tip and step amendment for some of the projects that receive stimulus funding to move forward to construction. Before we proceed with the presentation, we wanted to let you know that we are aware that you might have questions on how what we're proposing today fits with the overall picture of I-4. It's a very large, massive project that is very needed. And as you might be aware, is evolving, changing rapidly, a lot of stakeholders. So we are trying to articulate these changes as often and as quickly as we can. We also recognize that there has been a lot of back and forth. We've been here in the past, about a year ago, I think we were here. We presented some of the projects that received stimulus funding. We have tweaked scopes, updated cost estimates, updated schedules, and we're trying to be as transparent as we can, again, with this evolving and dynamic project. So again, we're here to hopefully answer as many questions as we have answers to, but it is a critical project for the region. We know it's a top priority for you as well as for us. And while we might not have all the answers here with us today, we are working, tweaking out the scopes. What can we do to move forward the project to build it as is very needed? So we're here today to present those projects that receive stimulus funding to move to construction. And we feel pretty confident that by the end of this year or early next year, we can come back, show you the details that we've been working on, and look at potential steps that we might take to move forward and build the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate project that we know is very needed. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it to Adam, and we're going to kick off the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Catalina. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present today on I-4 projects. Part of the TIP amendment, there are 4 project numbers, but before we get into those projects, we'd like to give you an overview of the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate Corridor. So if you see on the screen, the exhibit to the left, in the middle, in the gray color, that's I-4 Ultimate, recently construction complete with the express lanes open. North of that, we have I-4 Beyond the Ultimate North, comprised of 2 segments in Seminole County and Volusia County, segment 3 and 4. South of I-4 Ultimate, we call that I-4 Beyond the Ultimate South, which is comprised of 4 segments, segments 2, 1A, 1B, and 5, Orange and Osceola counties, and extends into Polk County. The biggest challenge with those Beyond the Ultimate segments remain the funding. Some of these segments, construction costs are hundreds of millions of dollars each. In Beyond the Ultimate South segments, some of these segments go up to over $1 billion each. So with funding, is a challenge. We continue to look for opportunities to, get the funding. But while we're doing that, we look for opportunities and options to improve I-4 based on the available funding that we have. How do we improve the operational needs? It's a critical corridor, like Catalina mentioned. So basically, we try to come up with projects that we think is beneficial, will improve the operations along the corridor with the funding that we have. For the purpose of today, we'll be focused on the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate South. So I'm going to go ahead to the next slide, which zooms into the south map. What you see on the screen is what the projects we have funding for construction. Again, not all of these are in the TIP amendment, but we just thought this is a good opportunity to present to the group what we have. We'll start with the one on the top right. That's I-4 at Sand Lake Road Interchange improvement project. The project is a design-build project. We're in active procurement as we speak. We expect that to go to construction sometime end of this year. After that, we have the 528 ramp widening project. The project, we're widening the ramp. If you're driving from the downtown Orlando direction and you're taking that 528 ramp today towards International Drive or the airport direction, that ramp in the existing condition is a single lane ramp. And what we're seeing is some backspill of the traffic backing up into the I-4 general use lanes. So this project just widens that ramp from single lane to 2 lanes. The project is in design as we speak. We expect that to go to construction sometime summer of next year, summer of 2023. Next project we have, the third one, is the I-4 at Darrell Carter Parkway interchange. We're building a new interchange at that location. The project was awarded a couple of weeks ago, so we expect that to go to construction sometime end of this year. And then lastly, the project at the bottom is the I-4 at 535 interchange improvements. We just advertised that project, so we're in the procurement phase as well. We expect that to go to construction sometime summer of 2023. Along with these projects, we are building a westbound express lane, so a single lane express lane in the westbound direction that's being built throughout all these projects. If I click next, that express lane is being broken down into a couple of projects, so it's just being built on multiple projects. So the first piece, so the dotted boxes are those projects that will build the express lane. So the first piece will be built part of I-4 at Sand Lake Road Interchange, so these are 2 goes with projects. Second piece of that express lane will be built part of Darrell Carter Interchange project. And then the last piece is being built part of the I-4 at 535 Interchange project. So it's just because of the location of the projects we have, and that express lane, it just made sense to be built part of those projects. So with that, for the TIP amendment, those are the project numbers you will see on the screen. The first So the two in green are goes with, the two in blue and goes with. When I say goes with, it means it's a single construction contract. So basically, it's two project number, but it's going to be built under one contract. We will start with the ones to the south. I'm going to turn it over to Catalina now. But before we do that, I just want to point out that we were able to utilize ARPA funding that we received for these projects, the I-4 at 535 interchange, and the piece of the express lane that goes with it. And the ARPA funding comes with some constraints. So they were fiscal year 23 funds, which means that you have to have a project ready in fiscal year 23. Some other constraints is you have to spend all the money by end of 2026, which means you have to design, construct, invoice out everything by the end of 2026. So with those constraints, we were able to put together these projects to take advantage of that ARPA funding. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it back to Catalina to go over these projects. Go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
On the interchange of 429 and I-4, you guys are going to do that on the I-4 beyond ultimate south?
Very, very good question. So the
Backs up north into 429 traffic.
very good question. The ones we're showing today are coming up for construction. The 429, the Ox Lane is actually in construction now. Also, the Champions Gate interchange is under construction. So those are under construction. We are just showing what's coming up next. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so first two projects are the 448914-1, that's the I-4 at 535 interchange improvements, and then goes with 449771-1, which is the last portion of the single express lane in the westbound direction. So here is an aerial of the existing configuration of the I-4 and 535 interchange. Some of the key intersections include Hotel Plaza Boulevard and Palm Parkway to the north, as well as Violent Avenue to the south. So while we are preparing our roadway plans in the RFP for the construction of this project, we're also validating traffic data and ensuring that this project and the proposed concept is going to serve the traffic demand well into the future. Some of the key concerns that we have is the existing I-4 westbound off-ramp to 535. That is under capacity, and we're projected to be under capacity. Again, some spillback might go into mainline I-4, which will pose a safety concern. Another key movement is the I-4, the 535 northbound to I-4 westbound I-4. So right now you have to get into the left lanes, wait for your signal, and come here to go to I-4 westbound. That is also a critical movement that we see that it needs additional capacity. So with this, initially what we had in mind was what we call displaced left turns. This was our initial proposed concept that we envisioned for this interchange. And with those critical movements that I just explained, we were proposing to displace the left turns here and get rid of the signal. The signal will come down here, will be stop control down here, and that way we'll provide more capacity for that movement. However, with validation of the data, this concept will no longer serve well into the future and support the traffic demand here. So with these key improvements, we are proposing to update our concept, which is an enhancement of the original PD&E concept to provide the most return on our investment and service life for this interchange well into the future. So here we're looking at what we're proposing for the improvements at 535. So as you can see, the two critical movements being this I-4 westbound off-ramp here, we are proposing to realign and widen this ramp to provide additional storage and capacity that is needed. And the other key movement, the one that you will come and make a left turn to go to westbound I-4, is being replaced with this loop ramp here. So this property here is a Crossroads property that is already acquired. So FDOT owns that parcel already. So we're able to not only provide water retention area that is needed for all of these improvements, but also provide this loop ramp that will greatly add capacity and queuing storage for that movement. Along with those improvements, we're also proposing to do widening work on 535 northbound. So we're proposing to extend the left and right turns that go all the way to Palm Parkway to provide additional storage. We're also proposing the Echelon intersection at Vineland Avenue and 535, which is consistent with the PD&E. And with that, we need to reconfigure this loop ramp to I-4 eastbound to ensure that this Echelon intersection fits. As I mentioned and Adam mentioned earlier, this project, we're able to advance this project to construction because of ARPA funding. And the funding is limited, so in order for us to advance to construction, we're proposing to phase this improvements at 535, with phase 1 being basically everything to the north of I-4. So I'm going to show you here what it is. So we're proposing to address those critical ramp movements, the I-4 westbound off-ramp, additional storage and realignment, as well as the loop ramp here. We will propose water retention here in this crossroads property that is needed for the extra pavement that we're building, the 535 additional storage left and right turns that go all the way to Palm Parkway, as well as major utility relocation shown here in green. This green line is FGT, Florida Gas Transmission Line, that needs to be relocated so that we can widen the existing bridge of I-4 here for the westbound express lane extension. So we're able to advance all of this with the stimulus funding. Project benefits of going with the phase approach is that we will continue our westbound improvements. So as I said, we will continue with that single westbound express lane. We are going to be addressing those immediate concerns that we have with queuing, spilling back into mainline I-4. The proposed work on 535 itself, the loop ramp and the off-ramp here is, we're minimizing throwaway. By removing the left turn here from underneath the bridge of I-4, it will help us facilitate future maintenance of traffic for phase 2 of the future phase 2 of this interchange. Brightline and the rail is something that is in everybody's mind. So by facing the interchange, we are essentially buying some time to see where the alignment will go. There's been talks about going in the median of I-4, but also maybe on the east side of I-4. So right now, the Sunshine Corridor is trying to look at the best way to deliver this project. And with, DOT has been in active coordination and conversations with Brightline. They are aware of these projects that are moving forward, and we will continue to coordinate with them. As I mentioned, we will be advancing the major utility relocation here, and we can build this with the available funding. Yes.
Thank you. I just had a question about this new loop ramp. It looks like the entrance to it going northbound on 535. It looks like you have a traffic light there. And if FDOT owns that whole property, why isn't it just a smooth ramp rather than coming up to a light to make the turn?
So
Seems like the movement could start further south there and enter that loop.
Yeah, and it's hard to see in this graphic, but yes, we will start separating that traffic farther closer to where my pointer is, and we will separate that. It will, right now is currently as a free flow ramp, so you don't have a traffic signal to wait to get on the ramp. It is hard to see here, but we will still need the signal here for the traffic from Hotel Plaza, because they will still be able to make a left turn here, going north and going south. But the actual on-ramp, this loop ramp, it is not signalized.
Okay, very good, thank you.
And then this is the Goes With project with the 535 interchange, 449771-1. As Adam mentioned, this will be building the last portion of that westbound express lane here, as shown with the dotted limits. That's basically where the project will extend. And it will be building the last portion of that that we also referred to as the tube in the past. Okay, some of the key dates for this design build procurement is we are in active advertisement phase right now. A critical date will be the federal authorization and the final RFP. We have to release the final RFP once we get federal authorization, and that is proposed to be October of this year. And it is tied to to passing the TIP-STIP amendment to be able to do the federal authorization. And we are proposing to have a bid opening or letting in May of next year. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it back to Adam.
All right, thank you, Catalina. So Catalina covered two project numbers that you see in the TIP amendment. I'm gonna go ahead with the other two projects, and really these two projects are the same. The scope has not changed from what you saw last year. It's just the projects roll forward from 22 to 23. So same projects, just roll forward. The first one is that piece of the express lane, the single lane express lane in the westbound direction. We built part of this project number, which is at Sand Lake Road interchange. Starts from just west of that. The reason it overlaps with the others is because based on the current schedules, we think this project will finish construction last along the corridor. As a result, this project will go ahead and put the final friction course and striping and tubular markers throughout the entire express lane. So that's why you see that overlaps with the other interchanges in the area. So that's one of the projects. The other one is the I-4 at Sand Lake Road interchange improvement project. You will see on the TIP amendment, again, same scope as last year, improving the interchange. We're also doing some improvements on the local network, which is something we always stress, that although it's an I-4 project, we're adding significant improvements to the local network. Today, if you're driving from the downtown direction on I-4, take the ramp to Sand Lake Road, and you're trying to go into Turkey Lake Road, there's a big weaving issue here. So this is Whole Foods market, you're familiar with the area. If you got off of I-4 and trying to go into Sand Lake Road, there's a lot of congestion in this. So what this concept brings, you just continue on this bridge, and then you access Turkey Lake Road from this signal. So you kind of, you kind of move that traffic to this location. The other thing we're doing is we're eliminating that left turn to Turkey Lake Road. Also helps improve that operation. So a lot of significant improvements along the local network. We're adding bike lanes and sidewalks as well. The project is in active procurement. We expect that to go to construction sometime end of this year. So that's all we had for you today. Any questions for myself or Catalina?
When you're coming down from.
Can you do your microphone? Can you hear your microphone?
I'm sorry.
Oh, they did it for you.
When you're coming down from Turkey Lake Road, across I-4, how do you get to,
If-
Sand Lake? Over the bridge?
If you're
North-
driving on Turkey
north.
Lake,
I'm sorry, on Sand Lake. Yeah, if you're coming from,
so if you're coming from, like say from International Drive and you're going under the bridge, you just take this loop ramp. You see that yellow line?
oh, yeah, okay, I see
Then
that.
you make that loop ramp, yep, and then you turn and get into Turkey Lake Road here at the signal.
Very good.
Yep.
Thank
so-
you.
Yeah, and one of my comments to that was, I hope we're gonna have really good signage because people can barely
Yeah,
figure out the left
absolutely.
turn, let alone
Absolutely, yep.
the U-turn, especially, I mean, tourist area.
Absolutely, yep. Very good point.
And then on the 535 Phase 1, is there any direct connect? I don't know where the direct connects are planned on beyond the ultimate. Is 535 gonna be one of those interchanges, or?
Not right now. So that we will have to look at the, this figure here. So that single westbound express lane, what we're doing right now, and this is an interim project that will serve us for the next 10 years. And once the future BTU comes here, we will be able to use that existing payment for shifting traffic around. So it's gonna help us in the future. But the immediate concern is, if people coming from I-4 Ultimate get off here, this is where I-4 Ultimate ends. And obviously there's a need to continue those express lanes. So we're proposing to continue just a single express lane here, but there is no access points. There is no entrance or exits. The last, you could exit here if you need to access all of these interchanges in between. And the reason why is when we were doing the traffic analysis, about half of the people coming from I-4 Ultimate, they want to continue going west and bypass all these interchanges. And also safety, because if, you know, you're coming here and you have to exit, there is going to be backing up into the express lanes that are just built. And and we ended it here strategically because once you exit, we have to provide a safe merge distance for vehicles to merge into main line of I-4. So as you can see, all of these interchanges are pretty close to each other. That was the safest place for us to terminate the single westbound express lane.
Okay, and then is there, you know, in the future, there will be the full I-4 express lanes, you said Bright Line. Is there any consideration for those future lanes to where this $200-300 million improvement doesn't have to be torn out to?
That's what we're still coordinated with Brightline. It's very unlikely. We have to, because of, we're also built, like, as part of the final configuration of I-4, we will also have to build a CD system here, because what we will be doing is pulling all of the traffic from I-4 mainline to the CD system, so the CD system can access this interchanges. And by adding that, we're making the footprint wider, and we have to raise the profile for water clearance purposes.
CD? Sorry.
A collector distributed system, sorry, yes. So that's basically another road parallel to I-4, but that road, you will be able to exit here, and you reduce the friction on mainline I-4, so it's a smoother ride on mainline
Like local
I-4.
exits instead of
Yes,
the main line? Okay.
yes.
All right, does anyone else have any questions? All right, so this is the FDOT amendment to the 2022-23 through 26-27 TIP amendment on tab 4 of your agenda. Seeing no further questions, do I hear a motion to approve?
We approve it.
All right.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Sladex, second by Mayor McCain, sorry, mayors, both mayors. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like side? All right, item passes unanimously. Up next, we have 3 informational presentations. First, we will hear a presentation on FDOT's functional classification and urban area boundary update process. The red button, there you go.
All right, thank you. My name is Jason Learned. I'm with the Florida Department of Transportation. Alice Giuliani could not be here today, so I'm going to give you all some information about the upcoming functional classification review and urban boundary update that is done every 10 years after the census. So why are we giving this presentation? We want to provide you the initial information about our upcoming work in reviewing and updating the functional classification and the urban boundary. And this is something that is going to be a multi-year effort. We've started some preliminary work here, but it's really not going to be finalized until 2025. So just at a glance, I want to give you all some background about the census update and the functional classification and the urban boundary. Talk a little bit about schedule, and then talk about the update process. So, as you know, 2020 was a census year, and every census period, the urban areas are revised. And hand in hand with that goes the functional classification review and updates, and as well as the urban boundaries. So what the Census Bureau produces is a census boundary based on population densities and development. But then FHWA allows the states to take that urban boundary and smooth it out a little bit, just so we don't have roads that are going continuously in and out of an urban boundary, just for consistency purposes and everything. So what is the functional classification? This is the method which assigns public roadways into classifications based on the character of service they provide, and it's part of a network. And there are a hierarchy of classifications which range from your neighborhood streets, such as the streets that you all live on, to arterials and then interstates and freeways like I-4 and State Road 417. And access and mobility are some of the prime considerations when we look at the hierarchy of road to determine what its classification is. So this slide is just some local examples of some of the different functional classifications. For example, you've got I-4, which is an interstate. You've got your freeways like State Road 408, 417, and 429. Your principal arterials like Colonial, 1792, and US 192. Some of your minor arterials like Seminole Boulevard, Carroll Street, Curry Ford. Some of your major collectors like Markham Woods, Weatherby, Lakeshore Boulevard. Minor collectors like Old Hickory Tree and Lake Baldwin. And then your very numerous local streets, which actually make up the bulk of the roadways, which are like Spring Valley Road, Ferguson Drive, or Patrick Street. This is just a graph to show how the hierarchy process works for functional classification, where your local streets, they provide the most access to homes and businesses, and arterials and interstates, which provide the least access to properties, but give motorists the greater mobility and speed. So the Federal Highway Administration, they have recommended ranges in which the different functional classifications should abide by. They're guidelines. They're not absolutely necessarily concrete rules that say we have to have a certain percentage of roads in each category. These are just guidelines. And this is where MetroPlan lies right now. For example, as you can look and see here, we're kind of under the range for minor collectors in urban areas, and then in some areas where we've got high locals. But that is something that really is based on the context of the area and may not be applicable to an entire region. So what is the functional classification used for and how is it applied? It can be considered in project prioritization. It can be considered with roadway design. Depending on the classification of roadway, it also affects data collected for federal highway for performance management. And then it also provides funding eligibility from certain sources. One of those primary sources is funding for FEMA, from FEMA after storms and events to clear debris from the roads. So going next to the urban boundary. This is simply the line that distinguishes urban areas from rural areas. And with the 2020 census, their methodology for defining the urban areas is moving away from census tracts and block population density to housing unit and development density. So there may be changes to some of the existing urban areas based on that. We don't know yet because the data has not been released to the states yet. That was something that was actually supposed to happen a few months ago, but from the Census Bureau, but that's something that's been delayed. So this map is just an example of an urban area in Osceola County and the functional classification. The urban area is the area contained, it looks, depending on your screen or your printout, it may look yellow or it may look mustard colored. And then the different colors of the roadways based on their functional classification. And where you see those circles, that's where the road transitions from urban to rural based on what direction you're going to. And then the functional classification changes from, if it's an arterial and it's minor, from rural to minor arterial urban, for example. So like I mentioned, there are some funding implications based on functional classification. And this, for local roads, they are not eligible for any kind of funding. One of the caveats with minor collectors is that in urban areas, they are eligible, but in rural areas, they are not. So that's a key consideration there. So this is our general schedule. Right now, we're providing our initial contact with all the MPOs in our region and all their committees. Hopefully, this winter, the Census Bureau will release the 2020 urban areas so we can start smoothing out those boundaries. And then the USDOT will designate transportation management areas, but that's not something that affects the Metro Plan region, so that's really nothing of concern there. So, like I mentioned, our meeting today, this is part of our initial outreach to all the MPOs and their committees. We will be doing the functional classification update. I will be doing that, and we have our consultant from Kimley Horn, Cliff Tate, who will be helping us. And then we'll be giving presentations as we're ready to share with the public our proposed changes. And ultimately, when we go through the process and we need that final approval from the MPOs, we'll be presenting as well. And we're going to be doing this first for the functional classification of roadways, and then we'll also be doing it for the urban boundary effort as well. So these are some of the, just to give you an idea, we've started back in August with our meetings, and this is actually the last last committee meeting today. And we're going through the DOT and our consultant, we're going through the quality control of reviewing the current functional classification data and identifying any new roadways or modifications to existing roadways and other changes. So some of the key players in the approval process, Federal Highway Administration, they're the ultimate authority in getting this approved. The people at FDOT's central office in Tallahassee, the Transportation Data and Analytics Office, they provide guidance and support to us. FDOT District 5, we're a signatory agency, and so is Metro Plan. So this is the contact information on the DOT side. Alice Giuliani will be she's the project manager, but, and my information's not on there, but I'll be happy to give that out. I'm kind of behind the scenes with this effort. And then the MPO contact is Alex. So some final considerations for you is that this meeting is our initial outreach, and that this is an important process, and everyone's participation is very important. So I'll now answer any questions you have.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for DOT staff? I have one. How do we discuss changes to that urban-rural boundary map with you guys? Because I feel like there's a disconnect between the census and when they get their information every 10 years, and then our future land use elements as local governments.
Okay, so the adjustment to the urban area, the smoothing of that boundary only happens every 10 years. With the functional classification, there's interim changes that you can make in the meantime for new roads that open. So for this process, what we're planning to do is we plan to develop an online map where members of the public can provide their comments and draw, well, I guess the first part is DOT is going to recommend changes to the smoothing of that boundary. And then once we provide those edits, we'll bring that out for public comment to see whether or not there's concurrence with our proposed changes, or if the local governments have any additional changes.
Okay,
Sure.
I'm Cliff Horn, I can also add to that.
can you go to the microphone?
Thanks, I'm Cliff Tate with Kinley Horn and Associates. And I'm just going to add a couple of things to that, is that, you know, as was mentioned, that the feds changed the methodology. You know, they changed it to the density of the housing and development. One of the thoughts behind that is that they can, you know, look at recent aerials to update things, because Florida grows so fast that there can be a significant difference from what's, you know, the people that are counted in, you know, during the census, and, you know, we're going to be 3 years after that. So that's one of the advantages. The other thing, so we should be able to make adjustments and smoothing to it to bring it to be where it's more accurate, up to date. It is a snapshot in time, though, and because one of the things that FDOT does, because we're always forward-looking, FDOT also includes what is called a transitioning area, and this is something we'll also be defining. The transitioning area is defined as the area that is anticipated to become urban within the planning horizon. And so what we do as a first cut of that, we typically start with a model. We look at the population density and the development that is assumed that drives the model. And then based on that information, we can make some pretty good guesses as far as what area will be, become urbanized within the planning horizon. So.
Okay, I guess the area I'm talking about is the difference between what's currently the urban area, which from the 2020 census, and then our future land use, urban area, urban growth boundary, that area in between would be this transitioning area?
Potentially, because this is, while, you know, hopefully the comp plans and the long-range plans are going in the same direction, or, you know, in lockstep, oftentimes they're not. And so the benefit to the local governments are that you control that. This is something that, you know, that DOT partners with the MPOs, and FHWA gets involved to come up with the decision for that's best for this application. So you could have a situation, it's not really tied to your urban growth boundary, but, you know, because there's part of the urban growth boundary that may not be urbanized within the planning horizon. So this is what this is looking for. And so there'll be, the expectations, they'll be very similar, but they don't have to be exact. So.
Okay, because a lot of local governments seem like they're urban type cities. The map you showed was a rural type city where the growth is coming, and if we do rural cross sections for some of those roads, it's not going to be adequate.
Yeah, and then just to further complicate things, is that urban and rural, when it talks about typical section, is totally unrelated to this at all. And so.
When I figured the classification for that road segment on at the DOT map, I figured it would be forced to be a rural.
Yes.
There's a separate process that DOT has developed within the past few years called context classification, where we develop, and this is separate from the functional classification, classifications on road based on the type of development they're in, and based on the type of development that they're in. For example, the way you would design a road through a downtown area would be drastically different than how you would design a road for a rural area that's not developed. And of course, promoting the appropriate types of modes in those within those sections is what comes into play, because in downtown you want to promote walkability, you want to promote bicycles and other methods of transport other than automobile. But in rural areas, that's not so much a concern.
Okay.
Yeah, and furthermore, then like from a typical section, urban means it's got curb and gutter, and then rural says you don't have curb and gutter.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but it's just the feel of the road's a lot different when you have roadside
yeah,
swales and all
yeah,
that. Bike lanes different and all that. Mr. Schauger?
Right, just to add, so there's the design aspect and construction aspect of what the facility will look like. But I think what's most important for this group out of this process is, as it relates to functional classification, and as it kind of goes back to the federal aid system, what Metro Plan Orlando can fund with state funds, it has to be on the federal aid system, which is functionally classified as a collector or above. And most of the funds that we receive are for urban area funds. So we're funding projects in the urbanized area on facilities that are collector or above. So that's when kind of driving decision-making, what's eligible, why we can't help with some projects because they're local, they're off-system. So that's where this process, we want to make sure we're identifying the network as it operates. You know, collectors do one thing, arterials do another, but there's also that acknowledgement of what will be eligible for federal and state funds as we go into the future.
Well, and that's why I want to make sure that urban versus rural area.
And that's
that
why
line
that's a
doesn't
very
issue.
important distinction. And as Cliff mentioned, the federal methodology has changed for setting that urbanized boundary. So we're still eagerly waiting to see where that line is drawn so we can start smoothing it and kind of identifying that transitioning area, as they mentioned. But it's like we're working in rears in most cases. You know, we're looking at the census and then trying to recalibrate, but based on the law, we're forced to look at the center, you know, kind of at that snapshot in time, and then use the transitioning area as our, you know, room for growth.
Perfect. Mayor Henson?
Well, I look at Keith's area and the way Harmony is developed. That area, you know, it's gonna take 192 all the way down to Holopong.
Yeah.
You know, there's just no other way around it, the way that area is growing. So, you know, we've got to look at those kind of things.
And my worry is that Kissimmee Park area, that's already, there's a big 4-lane urban section going through there, and it's called rural, and so, anyway, just some stuff, some food for thought. Anyone else have any questions? All right, thank you guys very much.
I'll be here until the end of the meeting. If any of you have any questions or whatever, feel free to catch me after work.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Up next is a status report on the Sunrail transition.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Kendall with WSP. I'm happy to be here with you this morning. I wanted to give you an update on a project we've been working on for about 1.5 years now, and it's looking at when FDOT is turning it over, how the local funding partners take on Sunrail, and what does that look like. So I'm going to go over a couple of key parts of the project. I know many of you are familiar with Sunrail, but just a little bit of context for those of you that may not be. Obviously, it's a 61-mile corridor, 4 counties, 17 stations. The trains generally operate Monday through Friday. There are some instances where they operate later in the evenings or on the weekends for special events. It's been developed in 3 different phases, Phase 1, 2, and Phase 2 North, which is the DeBerry to DeLand, which is under construction right now. And this goes back a long time, as you know. It's been in planning and design and now looking to transition. The interlocal agreements, which govern how things operate right now, were approved back in 2007. The governor actually approved it in 2011. Several stipulations that were important to note. FDOT was going to be responsible for the design, permitting, and construction of the system. They were also responsible for paying for the rail system for up to 7 years, beginning in May 2014. Do the math, it brings you to 2021. Obviously, we're in 2022. The reason that that's been extended is because Phase 2 North is under construction. So FDOT said, we're not going to turn over a system that's still in construction. We're going to wait until that's done. And then the Central Florida Commuter Rail Commission was created to serve as the advisory board for Sunrail. And it's made up of the 5 funding partners. And right now, the transition to the local funding partners is tentatively scheduled for June 2024. That's very tentative because it's definitely based on when Phase 2 North is going to be completed. And right now, as you see with everything, there's labor shortages, there's material shortages, so that date is very much tentative. Looking at the process that we went through, we developed the transition report. We looked at lessons learned from other systems, how do commuter rail systems operate across the country, what type of government structure do they have, how do they function operationally, staffing, contracts, and agreements. All of that is looked at as part of this transition plan. Right now, we've finished the initial transition report, which looks at existing conditions. The transition plan to take it to the close of the project is where we are right now. We looked at several different components of Sunrail as we went through. First, we started with an operational analysis. So we went into the field, looked at how everything was performing, and very good news for the local funding partners is that Sunrail is in a very good state of good repair. FDOT has done a great job taking care of the system, making sure things are up to date, and it's in a good position to be turned over to the locals. There's been no violations, citations from Federal Railroad Administration, which is also very positive. We do recommend, because this is going to take another year and a half or two before the transition occurs, to do another review of the operational status before it's turned over to the locals, just to make sure, nothing has been deferred. We have no expectation that it would be. FDOT's done a great job to date, but you would just want to take a look at something, before that transition occurs. The governance analysis. This is really critical, and timing-wise, this is really important because the CFCRC is meeting September 22nd, so just a couple of weeks from now, and they're scheduled to vote on what that governance option is going to be. So we looked at 3 different potential structures. The first option was CFCRC, and a point that's very important, the CFCRC retains through all of these different options. That oversight board never goes away. In the first option, you have everything in-house. So you would hire all of the staff, you would provide the administration and management, as well as the operation of the actual system. That would be 100% in-house. Option 2 would be a hybrid, where you would have some of the administration in-house, but then you contract out services to run the rail system, which is like how FDOT operates it currently. And then option 3 would be recruiting no staff and contracting all management and administration to another agency, which could also subcontract the actual operations of the system. And when we looked at option 3, we looked at three different agencies here in Central Florida to potentially run Sunrail. One was Lynx, one was CFX, and one was Brightline. And when we did the analysis, Lynx was the option that came out on top. So again, just a little more about each of the options. As I mentioned, the CFCRC stays in all 3 options. This option is the most expensive because you're creating everything from scratch. You've got to hire roughly 200 people. That's no easy doing. FRA would have potentially concern over a brand new operating team. They're comfortable with what's in place now. There's a high level of risk because you have all of the responsibility within that agency. You're not contracting anything out to an operator. Option 2 is the second most expensive. You're also creating a new agency, but you have less employees that you have to bring on hand. Some of the risk is shed to the operating contractors, which is definitely a benefit. FRA would have confidence that you would have some continuity of operations, so that would be a positive. And then option 3, which we're looking at as the Lynx option right now, would be the least expensive because you have an agency in place. You don't have to start from scratch. You already have a lot of the positions in-house. It would require, we're estimating only approximately 9 new additional Lynx employees, plus the percentages of time from the existing staff. The risk is shed from the commission to Lynx and primarily the contractors. And then FRA would have the level of confidence with continuing operations. We looked at the financial analysis, and this has definitely been the subject of a lot of debate and interest lately because, what the different entities have to spend on Sunrail is a big deal. So there were 4 different types of costs that we looked at. We looked at the insurance costs, operating capital costs, and also the station maintenance costs. Some of the factors involved with the operating costs include fuel, banking, ticketing, consultant support, and feeder bus service. And the way the allocations were made, we looked at it in terms of the total embarkings and disembarkings, and also the peak hour embarkings and disembarkings, and averaged them together. And then the fare box revenue is credited to each of the local funding partners. This is just a little bit more on the methodology. You start with your costs, you take away the revenue, you have your operating deficit, and then the operating deficit is split 5 ways among the funding partners based on the embarkings and disembarkings within their area. This just puts total numbers to it. So you have the annual numbers so that you can see how it was attributed and how each of them were allocated a certain percentage. You can see the counties where the ridership is lower have a lower percentage of the funding share, which obviously makes perfect sense. So you average Volusia from about 9.5% up to Orlando, the city of Orlando, at about 33%. And that was for operating. For capital costs, it makes more sense to look at track miles. So the cost for station upgrades, infrastructure upgrades, and the vehicle overhauls are based on track miles. And again, that's based on a percentage within the different jurisdictions. And it averages from 9% in the city of Orlando up to 27% in both Orange and Seminole County. This is just looking at a quick scan of the revenue. The top three are usage fees from the freight rail lines, which do use part of the Sunrail lines as well, so they pay a usage fee. There's advertising and the fare box collection. And then one of the big revenue items is the 5307 funding that comes from the Federal Transit Administration. So all of that is summarized in this table here, looking at the different cost options. Option one, as you can see, looking over to FY29, about $65 million annually in operating. Certainly. Sure. That one? I can. I think the
We'll provide the entire presentation following the meeting.
So the costs, this is how they break out across the different options. Option one, just as a refresher, was where a brand new agency is created, everything is done in-house. You've got about 200 employees. They serve the administrative and the operating functions. Option two is a hybrid, some staff, and then contracted out like FDOT does. And then option three would be using Lynx as the agency to do the operations and then contracted out for the actual operations of the trains themselves. And then this is a summary of what the share for each of the allocations for each of the funding partners would be by option one, option two, and option three. And then as we look at next steps, as I mentioned, the vote on the governance option 1, 2, or 3 that we just talked about is absolutely critical for moving forward. We've been working on some of the items in the boxes below the governance decision, but that's going to really drive a lot of how the rest of this plays in, and that's coming up at the CFCRC meeting on September 22nd. So we've been working on, we finalized the transition report. We did the board briefings, have been doing them through the summertime, looking at September for hopefully an adoption of that governance structure. And then we'll be working on the transition plan. So once we know what structure they're going to put in place, okay, now how do you actually take what are all those steps to get from, okay, you've got a structure now, how do you take to turning it over to the locals? And there's a lot involved with that. So we're hoping to have that wrapped up by the end of the year. And with that, I will be happy to take any questions anyone may have.
All right. First up, Nick.
A few slides back, there was the ridership, and it had ridership for DeLand, but I didn't think the station was open. Or maybe I misunderstood the slide. So how do we know, right?
It's at the bottom,
Okay, there. Yeah, I just didn't see it. Okay.
Yeah, we had to project something.
And DeBerry's at a full annual year?
It is, all the numbers are annually.
Wow. Thanks.
You're welcome.
And then, so that's 3.2 million total embark, disembark. And it was only $1 million in fare box revenue total?
Yes, so that's been another big issue. So they've been having issues with the fare box collection system for a while now. FDOT recognized that. They have a contract in place now where a company called Movell is taking over the fare box. They're setting up the system now. It should be operational by 2023. A lot of problems with that were, one, it didn't operate well all the time. So even people that wanted to pay, like, would get to the station sometimes and not have a mechanism to be able to pay. So that's been a problem. There's also fare evasion. They don't issue tickets when people aren't, get on and don't pay. They do make them get off. But so you have some riders that aren't paying at all. And then you also have, I think what was projected for the ridership is lower than it has actually been. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when you're projecting things are a little bit different. So the fare box revenue has been lower than hoped. But I think it's also important to note, though, that on a typical system, if you get 20% of your revenue from fare box collection, you're doing well. So it's always, FDOT's doing everything they can to increase the ridership, as are the locals, and, will be continuing to do for many years.
Yeah, and I thought like Lynx does a good job, and I think they're at like 30% fare box revenue for the expenses, but this is 2%, $1 million out of the 50 million.
It's low.
Okay, and I didn't know if there was a bunch of capital improvements shown in that $54 million number. How are we handling expansion? Hopefully a line from the airport to Sunrail. Is that something that there would be a capital call, I guess, to the local funding partners to construct that, or how does that
So
work?
the interlocal agreements that exist today only cover the 61 miles that will go up to Phase 2 North. So any expansions, you're going to need to modify, either modify or create new interlocal agreements to address that. So the CFCRC would still oversee that, but that would need to be put in place. So right now, this study is just looking at transitioning the existing system.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions, Parker?
So why is the ridership in Maitland so low? It's a nice station, but it doesn't have a lot of parking. Is that
I'm sorry, which one are you referring to?
Maitland?
Maitland? Why is it so low?
It's just, that's a shame. That's really low. Are they looking at expanding access to it or parking, do you know?
I don't know. I can find out and get back to you.
Did-
And I think in a lot of these too, that's why they're looking at it where it's possible doing transit-oriented development, which has been successful in certain cities, so that you've got apartments or housing and you've got a density right around the stations, which really helps to boost the ridership.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I would wonder how much these numbers are related to people now working at home instead of going into Maitland and things like that to work. So are these numbers kind of low because more people have not returned to working on their own homes?
Well, that's a very good question. What we actually did is we based it on 2019 ridership because that was the last time things were kind of normal. So for projections, that's what we've used. So I don't know offhand what the ridership is at the station.
Over the past 2 years, right? You wouldn't know that over the past 2 years yet.
We have the numbers. It's just, we just didn't use it for this project. But those numbers are certainly available and could be provided.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Our final presentation today is on Lynx recent adopted transit development plan. Mr. James Boyle from Lynx is here today.
Good morning, everybody. My name is James Boyle. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for Lynx. And this morning I'm here to present to you our transit development plan and walk you through our process and how we got to our final product. So the agenda really is just kind of laid out the way the TDP is laid out. So we'll go through a couple of elements in the TDP. Obviously, we will not cover everything because we'd be here for an hour. But just want to hit on the high plans, the highlights of the plan. And first of all, I want to talk about what is a TDP? What is a transit development plan? And so a TDP is a 10-year planning document that all transit agencies in the state of Florida are required to have. And it's necessary for a few things. So one, it is our policy guiding document. It is our planning guiding document, and it's the document that we go to for development of new service. So it really, there's three important things. Those are three important things that a transit development plan does for transit agencies. It is required by DOT that every transit agency have a TDP. And if you do not have a TDP, you do not receive funding. So it is directly tied to funding from the state. So that's a big caveat there. And the TDPs are broken up into major updates and minor updates. And so this is a major update, and major updates occur every 5 years. And then annually after that, basically it's a report card. How are you doing? What successes have you had? What things need to be changed? And of course, in the development of a TDP, we look at changing demographics, changing travel patterns, what has changed in our area over the past year, the past 5 years, or 10 years. So very important to look at as well. And obviously, public involvement is a very big component of what we do in transit and transit planning. And so public involvement is really throughout the entire process, and I'll show you some of that in detail. I want to talk a little bit about how this plan was actually developed, and it's a little bit different than been done in previous years, simply because there was a lot of work previously that's gone in to transit planning in our region. So over the past couple of years, Lynx has worked very closely with our funding partners, namely the 3 counties, Orange County, Osceola County, and Seminole County, to develop individual transit plans for those counties. And those plans were developed over basically a 2-year process prior to us initiating the update of our major TDP. And so what we wanted to do was take all of the work and all the effort that went into developing those individual county transit plans and translate that into our 10-year horizon for the transit development plan. So we're not really duplicating efforts and creating a whole new document. The county transit plans are based on a 20-year horizon. So obviously we had to narrow that down to fit into the 10-year horizon for the TDP. And out of the county transit plans, the Orange County Transit Plan is actually adopted by the Orange County Commission, so it is a fully adopted transit plan. One of the big things that came out of the transit plans and through that effort was really looking at and identifying the different types of transit elements, the different types of transit modes. So what you saw earlier from DOT was a presentation on functional classification of a roadway system. And transit kind of works the same way. So you have your much larger transit modes like a Sunrail or your regional express or your regional commuter modes that move a lot of people long distances. And then you kind of go down that hierarchy to high frequency routes, local bus service, and then you get down into the neighborhood level of community circulators and community on-demand flexible services like NeighborLink. So NeighborLink is kind of that neighborhood community connector that gets you to the larger transit system. So like I said earlier, outreach is a big part of what we do in a transit development plan and really anything that we do at a transit agency. And so this slide here really kind of summarizes all of our outreach efforts that we did through this process. We had numerous public workshops. We had outreach at a lot of our super stops and stations. We have a regional working group that we coordinate with and meet with on a quarterly basis at Lynx. So that regional working group is made up of representatives from all of our funding partners, from the 3 counties, from I believe all of the municipalities are invited to participate in our regional working group. And that would be more on a staff level. And then for this project, we also created a technical advisory committee where we had involvement from all of our funding partners as well. And we did a lot of discussions internally. So it's important for us to do a lot of public outreach and external outreach, but we also need to make sure that we're capturing internal discussions and coordinating and communicating with each other internally on projects such as this. Obviously, social media is a big way to reach people, so that was a big part of our outreach. And we did stakeholder interviews as well. So we identified numerous stakeholders, including Metro Plan, where we had actual interviews, and we sat down, talked to our partners about Lynx. What are we doing well? What could we do better? What is the region going to look like in 5 years, 10 years? So really good information and feedback we got from our stakeholders. And then we also had a survey that we put out. Their customers or riders could fill out a survey as well. So we held public workshops. We had one in each of the 3 counties. 2 of them, all 3 of them were in person. 2 of them were available virtually. So we had one in Altamont Springs, and we had one at Lynx Central Station, and we also had one down at Kissimmee City Hall. The way we reach most people, to be honest with you, is to go out to where they are. So a big part of what we did was to go out to the riders on our system. We had outreach in all 3 counties, and you can see them listed here on the screen for you. And this is really where we get the most valuable information. We're actually talking to our riders, we're talking to our customers face to face, and we're giving them information about our transit development plan. And you can see here on the map on the screen, there's a QR code that people could scan, and it would take them directly to a survey that they could fill out online. So the outreach in person is really one of the best things you can do. Again, social media always is important, and we recognize not everyone has access to social media or uses it, so that's why we also do a lot of the face-to-face in-person outreach as well. So looking at some of the results we get from our survey, the top 3 you see here in front of you, number 1 and number 3, those are things that we hear all the time. And some of you may probably hear it too, from your constituents. We want more frequency. We want buses to come, every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes. And then we also want more weekend service and more late night service. And we know that those 2 things are very expensive. So especially when you talk about frequency, if you have a typical bus route, right, it runs every 30 minutes, and you want to up that frequency to 15 minutes, you're talking about close to $1 million a year in operating costs just for that one route to go from 30 minutes to 15. So it's very important to remember the cost when we talk about frequency and spans of service. Again, this is a survey result. You can see here, 76% of the people who responded to our survey said that they would likely use higher frequency service. But they also pointed out the importance of local route network. So that local network that gets down into the collectors, the major collectors, minor collectors, and also closer to the neighborhoods as well. In the development of our TDP, we always want to look at our goals, update our goals. So for this plan, we kept it pretty simple, but important. So there's 4 goals that we call out here. And if you look at it, it's advance, enhance, promote, and deliver. So we want to advance a reliable and a safe and equitable dynamic system for our riders and our customers. We want to make sure we're enhancing our customer experience and our communications with not only our customers, but our stakeholders as well. And then we want to be a part of that community to help promote economic competitiveness, sustainability, and quality of life for all residents of Central Florida. And then obviously, we want to deliver a seamless transit network for the region. A part of a TDP is a peer review. So every agency is required to do a peer review. We went through an exercise where we identified peers that we wanted to compare ourselves to. And there's a full range of metrics that you can use to make these comparisons. And these are just a couple of snapshots, screenshots of some of those comparisons. And so the pink is where Lynx is. The black line represents the mean of our peers that we compared ourselves to. So for instance, average trip length in miles, you can see that we are above the mean. We have a very large service area, so we have people taking very long trips across the region. So kind of gives you, just a little taste and flavor of how we compare to our peers. And then, of course, you always want to compare yourselves on cost effectiveness and those sorts of things as well. And the interesting thing about Lynx is that our operating expense per passenger trip is actually very low compared to our mean, compared to the mean, but also compared to our peers. So it means that we're running a pretty efficient transit system. So how does all this tie together? How do we take all of the data we looked at? How do we take all of our public involvement? How do we take those 3 county plans and how do we condense that into our 10-year transit development plan? So what you see here on the screen in front of you is a map that shows to the left, or my left, is the existing transit system as it is today, and then the 2032 network that we built using the input from those 3 plans and also from all of our public outreach. And really the thing that stands out are the thicker lines, the darker colors. And so those would be a lot of the newer services that would be introduced. And we talk about things like new commuter routes, express routes, higher frequency service, better service on major corridors like State Road 50 and Silver Star, for instance, where we would make major capital improvements to accommodate higher frequency bus service. So looking at all of the proposed future plans, or improvements, we forecasted that we could increase ridership by more than 35% over that span of years if we're able to do all these things that we have laid out in our plan. So obviously, funding is a big part of that, right? And so these would be, some of them would be unfunded needs, but in the long term, we would hope that we would work towards a place where we could get most of these things funded. And this will help us when we go for funding applications from, say, DOT for service development grants, or even working with FTA and getting small starts money for bigger projects like the major corridor improvements for higher frequency, higher capacity transit service. So where we are in our schedule, we're basically to the end of it. We presented this to our board back in August for transmittal of our draft document to DOT. So our draft document is with DOT currently. Our regional working group and our technical advisory committee have both reviewed our draft document and have submitted comments to links for us to incorporate or to take into account in our final document. So the document basically has to be approved and adopted by DOT by the end of December. So we're kind of in a phase right now where we're waiting to hear back from DOT. Certain we'll probably get comments or questions. We'll address those. So that's basically where we are at this point. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Boyle. Does anyone have any questions? Wow. All right. Thank you.
I actually have one question, but it's apart from
Wear a
this.
hat. Sure.
Sorry about that. Would we
Thought it was
contact
gonna
you
get
if there's, we've had some requests in Edgewood regarding some of the bus stops.
Mhm.
If we have some repairs or something like that, who would we contact about that?
You can contact me.
Okay, great.
Yeah, just
Thank you.
contact me and I'll get it to where it needs to go.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And that concludes today's presentations. There are several items under general information on tab 5 of your agenda packets. A lot of good information. There'll be a quiz on it next meeting, so come prepared. Upcoming meetings of interest, we do not have an October meeting. Our next MAC meeting will be November 3rd. The next Metro Plan Orlando board meeting will take place here on September 14th. Are there any committee member final comments for today? All right. If there are any, our final item is public comments. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment? Please use the raise hand feature on your Zoom or dial *9 on your phone keypad, and we'll unmute your microphone. After you are recognized, please state your name and address for the record and keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. Are there any comments at this time?
There are no hands raised on the virtual side, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. And then were there any written or phone comments submitted?
Nothing physically.
All right. At this time, there is no further business, and we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.